Okay, so as promised, part 2, we continue exponent rules and properties, and this is where we will look into the rational exponents. Okay, so x to the m over n, think of this as power over root. So 4 to the 1/2 power, this would be 4 to the first power, and you're taking the square root of that answer. So 4 to the 1/2 would just simply be 2. 4 to the negative 1/2, make the negative exponent positive by taking the reciprocal of the base. 1/2 power is the same as the square root. So 4 to the negative 1/2 would evaluate to 1/2. All right, for number 15, you've power to a power here. When I see this, I see that we're multiplying two negatives, so that would make my exponent positive. So we'll go 8 to the 1/3. Okay, 2/6 reduces to 1/3. This becomes the cube root of 8, and the cube root of 8 is 2. Number 16, we have a fraction, so we can bring that exponent of 1/3 to both the numerator and the denominator. Okay, we can't distribute when we're adding and subtracting, but we can when we're multiplying and dividing. So this would become the cube root of 125. This power to a power I can multiply. 6 times 1/3 would give me 2. So x squared is in the bottom. And the cube root of 125 is 5. So 5 over x squared would be the final answer. All right, negative 9 to the 1/2. Let's recall our order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So when you're evaluating this, exponents come first. So this is really the opposite of whatever 9 to the 1/2 power would be. 1/2 power is the same as the square root. So the opposite of the square root of 9, our answer would be -3. Now on this one, again, exponents first. So this would become -1 over, making that exponent positive, 9 to the 1/2 power. So -1 over the square root of 9, and -1/3 would be your answer. Hopefully you're seeing on these two examples and the two before, these are just inverses of each other. All right, my pen doesn't want to work. So let's see if my computer will work. So here we go. 4 to the 1/2, 4 to the negative 1/2. These solutions are just inverses of each other. -9 to the 1/2, -9 to the negative 1/2. These answers are just inverses of each other. Okay, so now I'm multiplying, so I can take that exponent and distribute it in. So I would have 3 to the 1/2 to the 2 times 5 to the 1/2 squared. All right, here we go again, multiplying my exponents. 1/2 times 2 would give me just 1, so that would be 3 to the first. 1/2 times 2 is 1 again, so 3 times 5, that would give me 15 as my final answer. Now on this one, because I have the plus sign here, I cannot distribute this exponent. So I'm going to rewrite this as the square root of 3 plus the square root of 5, quantity squared. When I'm squaring a binomial, that means I'm multiplying it by itself. So first, square root of 3 times square root of 3 would give you just 3. Outer, square root of 3 times square root of 5, you would get square root of 15. Inner, same multiplication, square root of 5 times square root of 3 would be square root of 15. And then last, root 5 times root 5 would give you +5. So combining like terms, this would become 8 plus 2 times the square root of 15. All right, so no matter what our exponents look like, if we have a plus or minus on the inside, you can't distribute whatever exponent's outside. All right, now, these should say solve. Solve each equation. Okay, well think about what it means to be an equation. We need the exact same thing on the left-hand side as is on the right-hand side. So when you look at this equation here, notice that your bases are equivalent. So if you want these two expressions to be the same, then it forces the exponents to be equal to each other. So solving this simple equation, we get x is equal to 6. So for the next one, 9 to the x equals 3 to the 5th. Now the bases are not the same, but we can rewrite 9 in base 3. So if we think about what 9 is equivalent to, 9 is equal to 3 squared. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that. That's to the x equals 3 to the 5th. Now I have power to a power, so power to a power I multiply. Now that I got an equation where the bases of the functions are the same, I can set the exponents equal to each other. So 2x would equal 5, which would make x is equal to 5 halves. All right, now for a quick check, if I plug x back into my original expression, okay, it would have 9 to the 5 halves power, and then using the properties of exponents, this is the square root of 9 to the 5th power, right? Power over root. The order in which you evaluate them doesn't matter. Square root of 9 is 3, and I end up with 3 to the 5th, which is exactly what the question started with. All right, x to the 2/3 is equal to 9. So now when you have a rational exponent, then what we do is take each side and raise it to the reciprocal power. So I'm going to raise both sides of the equation to the 3 halves power. Why do I pick 3 halves? Because that exponent rule of power to a power, I multiply those exponents, and that'll cancel to 1. So I get x is equal to 9 to the 3 halves power, so that's the square root of 9 cubed. Square root of 9 is 3, and then 3 cubed would give me 27. So 27 would be your final answer. As a check, go back to the original. 27 to the 2/3 power, that's the same as the cube root of 27, quantity squared. Cube root of 27 is 3, and then it verifies again that we got our 9 over there. Sorry that the pen continues to go crazy. All right, last one. I do like to write negative exponents as positives first, so I'm going to write this as 1 over x to the 1/2 power. So how do I solve this? I'm going to multiply by x to the 1/2 on both sides. So I get 1 is equal to 4 times the square root of x. Okay, because we know x to the 1/2 is the same as the square root of x. Dividing both sides by 4. And then how do you undo the square root of something? Now I'll square both sides. So 1/16 would be your solution for x. All right, we go back and check it. So it would have 1 over 16 to the negative 1/2 power. All right, so how do we make negative exponents positive? Take the reciprocal of the base. So this would be equal to 16 to the positive 1/2 power. 1/2 power is the same as the square root. There's our answer of 4. Okay, so this is what you will be working on in class. If you have time, if your class doesn't meet tomorrow, if you want to start on some of these problems. And the extra practice that we have listed is when you're preparing for the test or quiz, if this is a difficult section for you, you've plenty that you can work on. All right, see you next class.